and to the viewing public. It is now 9:07 a.m. with four members present. We have hereby established a quorum to conduct today's meeting. For the members joining us this morning, to my left, we have Representative Edwin Probst, and we have Representative BJ Atto, Representative Marissa Flores, and we have Diego Camacho and Representative Beneventi. With that being said, we are ready to conduct today's committee meeting. Can I please get a motion to adopt today's agenda? I recognize our Vice Speaker, Angelo Camacho. So motion has been offered and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye. All who oppose say nay. Motion carries. Today's agenda is hereby adopted. Next, let's see. That one. The next item on the agenda would be the public comment. Does anyone in the gallery wish to give their public comment on any item on today's agenda? If so, please state your name and agency you represent for the record. There's no public comments. We'll go to old business, or moving along the order of business. We have nothing under old business. Without further ado, under new business, we have line items A, subpoena duces tecum, subpoena ad testificandum for the Commonwealth Utility Corporation's bank financial statement from Bank of Guam. I now open the floor for discussion. I recognize Representative Flores.
Thank you, Chairman. So on this new business, this is a carryover conversation from the last session that we had. And so we'll be voting on the subpoena for those records on this agenda, correct? On this item.
That's affirmative.
Okay, thank you.
So just a point of clarification. Again, we did submit a letter to the acting executive director of CUC to submit a financial statement from the bank, not in-house, the bank itself. They've requested a 10-day extension, and we granted more than 10 days. So tomorrow is their final day to submit the bank financial statement. So have someone offer a motion to issue a subpoena duces tecum, subpoena ad testificandum for CUC's bank financial statement. Recognize Rep. Flores.
Maybe this is a question. Thank you, Chair. Maybe this is a question for council. So can we go ahead and take a vote on that prior to the expiration of the extension that they had asked for? Assuming that they don't comply with the request, we're a day in advance to offer the subpoena or to vote on that. Would that cause any conflict?
No, you can, the committee has authority to consider and to vote whether to issue a subpoena at any time for the chairman, regardless of some future act. Now, obviously, I'm assuming that the chairman, if the vote is approved, will wait until and see whether the documents arrive tomorrow. And then if they do not, consider issuing the subpoena after that.
Thank you, council. With that being said, then I guess I'm ready to vote, Chairman.
So again, just to clarify, the bank account statement that we're talking about is the actual bank account statement from the bank itself, right? Not their financial record keeping and their spreadsheet or any of that. The reason for that, because we want to know, have they complied with stipulated order number one to ensure that they have a separate account for emergency, a separate account for maintenance and operations, their general funds, their security deposit, all of those things have to be separated in a different accounts. They all cannot be commingled. And that's what we're trying to find out is actually where do they stand financially. And in order to do that, we need the actual bank account with the bank account number, with the name on that bank account or description of that bank account to ensure that it is separated in accordance with stipulated order number one. Okay, have someone offer a motion to issue a subpoena ducis tecum, subpoena at testificando for CUC's bank financial statement from Bank of Guam.
So move, Chair.
Motion has been offered and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? I recognize Mrs. San Nicolas. Roll call.
Representative Edwin K. Probst,
Yes.
Representative Marissa R. Flores,
Yes.
Representative Diego Vincent F. Camacho,
Yes.
Representative Blas Jonathan B.J. T. Attal,
Yes.
Representative Angelo A. Camacho,
Yes.
Representative Vincent R. S. Audon.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, 6 members present voted yes and 3 members are absent.
Thank you. With 6 members voting on the affirmative, the motion to issue a subpoena ducis tecum at testificandum is hereby adopted. Next item under new business, we have line item, what's it? Can request a recess? Or, yeah. We're back in session. So next item under new business is item B, House Bill 2352, to authorize the Commonwealth Economic Development Authority that they must write off the principal sum and interest loan extended to the Commonwealth Utility Corporation, CUC, and for other purposes. Any discussion? I recognize Representative BJ Yato.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First and foremost, thank you for presenting this legislation or introducing it so that we can discuss this legislation. But in our previous discussion with the CEDA, I think that the legislation in itself is kind of moot at this present time, just because we're not talking about the loan route right now. CEDA is in a position of ownership. I think we need to sit with CEDA and CUC and even with CHCC, because the intent is really to help both entities, no, CUC and CHCC. I know that the next legislation we'll be discussing is the Senate version of the commercial rates that we had previously adopted for passage in our previous meetings. But I think this legislation, it's important, yes, and we need to move forward with it. Unfortunately, in this legislation we're talking on the position of that grant that was given to CUC through CDA, I think under Public Law 4-95, if I'm not mistaken, that created CDA at the time. And with the 702 funds that came into the CNMI, granted funds for CUC for the power generation. I think that was the same period where they were separating CUC from the Department of Public Works, and CUC was going to become its own autonomous agency back in the late 80s, early 90s. And when 15-12 was amended back then in the 15th legislature, it mentions that the write-off, that CDA at the time may write off that $45 million grant that was given to CUC from CDA's application through the 702 negotiations. And right now, at this current period, from our previous conversation with CEDA, which is what used to be CDA, is now they're in the position that it's ownership, not the grant anymore. So I think we need to go back and say, have a sit with the CEDA, CUC, and even CHCC, because the intent of this both legislation is to assist CUC, and we understand that CUC's been going after CHCC and even the central government and its debt to CUC for lack of payment. I know that there's challenges from both sides, the government side and CHCC side, in regards to the calculations. I think I think we should put this bill on hold for now until we have a true conversation with CEDA, CUC, and CHCC, so we can try to help all parties, as the intent of this legislation and the next legislation, to which we had already passed the similar legislation to what Senate Bill 2337 SD1 that we passed a couple months ago from this body. So I think we need to hold on to this specific legislation, 2352, and have a real conversation with CEDA, because their intent, their understanding is it's a sense of ownership now in CUC, and what we're trying to do is to help CUC get in its financial feet, and at the same time also assist CHCC and the rest of the government in the rates that they're paying currently. And I believe if we work this out with CEDA, CUC, and CHCC, we can help all parties at the same time. The real goal is to press that reset button and start all over, and make everybody whole again, and so we can move forward with whatever fees that we so choose to start charging outside of private, and I think that's just my take, is we should hold on 52 right now, so that we can have a meeting and an understanding with CEDA, CUC, and even CHCC. And we'll be, I guess, a representative of the central government in that meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I recognize Rep. Flores.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Rep. Atel. I know that we have historically been going back and forth on this CETA. We did have a time when they came in and sat down. Executive Director Sablan gave his take on it. But I think I would have to disagree just a little bit with Rep. Atel. The purpose and the intent is to help the people of the Commonwealth and to bring down the utility rates. Now, I firmly believe that, had these bills been paid a long time ago, we wouldn't be in this position. Now, in part of your bill, you talk about Part B on page 5. The write-off authorized under this act shall be deemed the final settlement of all debts, obligation, and claims arising from the loans extended to CUC. That's number 2. Number 3, the write-off authorized under this act shall not affect any other rights or obligation of CUC or CEDA under the amended memorandum. There's a part here that you talk about all of this write-off is really to pay off all of these debts that CUC incurred. Can you take me through what this debt is? What is this that we're trying to write off? Is it all the stipulated orders, all the lawsuits? What is this compiled of? Can you bring some clarity in layman's terms so that the people understand the true intent of this bill?
Thank you, Rep. So this issue dated back in late 80s and, if I'm not mistaken, early 90s, 91. Under the 702, CNMI was granted funding by the federal government, right? And under that funding, the CEDA was created, right, to be the banking institution for the central government. Now, what had happened is when the central government received the funding from the federal government, they placed those fundings under the CEDA. When CEDA took that funding, it was required by the federal government that it be split into 2. One was for grant for the capital improvement projects. The other part was that they were going to take some of that funds and put it in a bank account where other entities could avail to those funding under a loan program, right? Somehow, somewhere between that line, it got fuzzy, and confusing because CUC borrowed money 3 times without paying it back at all. So the arrears that they received from the penalties, the interest, and all that amounted to over $100+ million. CDA took CUC to court, and the court favored CEDA. But again, CUC didn't pay. So what had happened was that they went back, and there was legislation approved and passed that gave CUC or mandated CUC to give a share to CEDA at the same time, so that CEDA doesn't collect the $100+ million that was owed. They took it down to from $100+ million to $45 million in shares. So CEDA became an owner of CUC, right? And it wasn't until 2016 is when CUC started paying that $45 million share. Now, here's the thing about that. When CUC and CEDA agreed to that shareholder stock ownership, CUC had to find a way to pay that shareholder. And how does it pay that shareholder? By tagging it on to the rates. That is how it collects the funding to pay. Now, that funding that it collects through the public falls under your surcharge, right? It's not, it doesn't, when we're talking about the write-off, it's, you cannot write off a court mandated, especially the federal court. Stipulated order 1 and 2 is separate from this stockholdership, right? So there, you can't touch that, right? CUC has to pay that. It's mandated by law, the federal government, right? The $45 million share is what we're trying to accomplish to write off. But in order to write that off, we need to ensure, like Representative BJ Atto said, that we need to make sure that everyone gets to eat, everyone gets to move, all boats rise, not just one. Just because we write off, if it comes to that point where we write it off, we cannot just let CUC sell off into the sunset. But yet at the same time, the hospital, the central government, are still lagging behind or sinking for that matter. We cannot allow that. And, I'm sorry, I'll recognize. Okay. So we, as the legislature, that deals with funding and whatnot, we cannot, in our good conscience, allow one to rise while the rest falls. So now we are already, the central government, the hospital, right, are already close to, if not already $8 million in arrears. There's no way that the central government can afford to pay that. There is no way that the 60 million that the hospital owes to CUC can pay that. So we have to find a way where the CDA, we need CDA to come in and sit down with us, negotiate so that everybody can rise. And if CUC is given the chance to breathe by eliminating or writing off that, $45 million, there's no way that the surcharge should be, staying where it's at, because it's no longer, CUC is no longer obligated to pay that, right? So it gives CUC room to move. At the same time, it gives the hospital room to move. And at the same time, it gives the central government room to move, because everybody's broke. CUC is broke, hospital is broke, central government is broke. And who pays for all of these debts? The people. So we cannot file a bankruptcy because it doesn't help anybody. We cannot afford to keep tagging these high price of utility to the public. And at the end of the day, every single one of us in the CNMI is paying for that. So whether we like it or not, the reset button has to be pushed. I recognize Rep. Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if that's the case, right, and I think a lot of the people, the general public, have been very concerned about what these surcharges are. And I want to thank you for, explaining that in layman's terms, and so that we can all understand, what it is that the bill is trying to do. Now, going back to Rep. Attal, then I also agree now that we need to bring them back. And we should bring them back with a set agenda of whatever topics we need to talk about to move and facilitate this bill forward. However, that's possible. But the end result is, once we reduce this power, once we figure out how to reduce the rates to the people, then everybody in the Commonwealth is afforded some breathing space, including the CNMI government. So thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for explaining that. With that said, I yield.
Thank you, Rep. Flores. I recognize Rep.
Thank you again, Mr. Torres. Thank you, Rep. Flores. And I think, I think it's important also that we have the council John chime in on this, because he was part of that conversation with CEDA and in regards to this ownership, this dividends now. And I'll speak after John, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay with you and our colleagues, that our council kind of further explains the understanding that CEDA actually is in a position of ownership now. Is that okay? If it's no objections from the members or you, Mr. Chairman?
No objection. I just wanted to make sure that we remind, because when we did talk about, and we gave them what, 90 days, right, to come back to sit down with us again. And the next time we would include everybody,
Yes.
right? Okay, I recognize the council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I learned something very important at that last meeting, and it went by so quickly, and it really hasn't been until thinking about it later and the comments by Rep. Tao that its significance has grown. The single most important statement that was made that day was that there is no longer any loan debt. It doesn't exist because they settled it. This bill that y'all have before you today seeks to impose a settlement on that debt by writing it off, but it doesn't exist anymore, as they very expressly said, and I think correctly said. So even if you passed this bill as it's written, it would not accomplish what you want. It would be simply eliminating a debt that doesn't exist. So it essentially would do nothing, because the debt, if that's what they call it, we call it a grant, doesn't matter. It was just a set amount of money, was resolved by converting it to shares in CUC. And as Rep. Tao said, that means that CETA now has ownership through shares in a corporation and is receiving that money through the payment of dividends, which is a very odd arrangement and raises other legal issues that we don't need to discuss today. But that's how it was resolved. So if this committee and the House as a whole is interested in how to address the shortage of payments by various government agencies, the money is no longer sitting as a loan. The money is streaming as paid dividends from CUC to CETA. And some of that money has already been distributed in various ways. One of them was to send some money over to help with the NMC and other important projects. So that's where the money is if you're looking for it. And any legislation or any discussion of a settlement should focus on that source of money. So, and this is not a necessary solution, it's just an example. You know, if you passed a bill that said that 50% of the dividends had to go toward grants to agencies to pay their light bill, that's a source of money that could do that. I know you'll have lots of projects you want to do it, but that's that. You see what I'm saying now about the source of the money and where it is and what the legislation. When we drafted this legislation, I don't think we had that knowledge. I mean, it existed, but as everybody has explained, this is a very complex series of events. So I legally have to say that the bill is completely insufficient to accomplish the original purpose anymore, because CETA has done that which we wanted, which was to settle the debt. They did it in a different way than the legislation suggested, but they had the authority to do that. Okay, so I hope that helps.
Mr. Chairman, and in addition to that, yes, CDA has ownership in regards to dividends with CUC, no, but those dividends belongs to the SNIOD body. So one way that we can leverage this conversation with CETA is to give them the funds directly. Whatever's in existence of that, you can have and use it to whatever investment you so choose, provided, however, that the dividend payments will cease from CUC, and then we can move forward with the other obligations that's owed to CUC, because this is one way take care of everybody's debt to CUC. And CUC is in a position, so is CPUC is in a position to go that direction so that we can get everybody back as a whole, and then we can move forward. I know that the next legislation is talking about CHCC's obligation to CUC. The previous bill that we had adopted and passed in the House is covering all government entities. No? And so I think that that's important. We've already taken that step. We get to this level, and if we can negotiate with the CEDA to remove this obligation from CUC, give them the remaining funds for whatever engines or whatever they so choose to invest that money into, and make CHCC whole at the same time. I think that's an important thing. Even the next legislation that's on calendar for action today, that might be moot at this point right now. Because if we can negotiate and fix all of this stuff, there's an existing bill that's sitting in the Senate that would address that, and the arrears would also be addressed. And I know that the Senate version talks about the arrears. We don't need to talk about the arrears, or we need to do prospectively. By fixing the problem with CEDA and CUC, we can remove the arrears through that negotiation. The legislation itself is already in a position to move forward, so that while we're addressing all these arrears, the rates for CHCC and all the other government entities would already be put at a lower rate moving forward if that bill gets to the governor's desk at the soonest. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rep. Ato. So I do agree. I totally do agree with that. That this is the current bill 2352 is something that we could put on hold on until such time that we can get CEDA, CUC, the hospital, and the central government to come in and sit down with us so we can fix this together as a whole, not us trying to discuss something that, I don't want us to slip up on this bill, because this is something that really does affect every single individual in the CNMI. So I do agree that we will hold on 2352 until such time that we could set up a schedule where all involved sit down and we can negotiate this. Because at the end of the day, this is going to be the biggest impact that, CUC, CEDA, the hospital, the central government, and the people at large will benefit if we can all agree, and we should come to an agreement. Because at the end of the day, like I said earlier, we are all ratepayers, and it doesn't help the majority of the public or any agency if only one is benefiting and the rest are suffering. So I agree that line item B should be placed on hold until such time that we could schedule where everybody can have a seat at the table and discuss the issue. So with that being said, okay, I recognize Rep. Komatsu.
Yeah, motion to table House Bill 2352.
Second.
There's a motion to table item B, House Bill 2352, and it has been seconded. All in favor, say aye. All those that oppose, say nay. Motion carried. So table House Bill 2352. We now moved on to the next item under new business. We have line item C, Senate Bill 2337, Senate Draft 1, to mandate the Commonwealth Utility Corporation to change the power, water, and wastewater rate for the Commonwealth Healthcare Corporation to commercial rate and for other purpose. Discussion? I recognize Representative Bato.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And like I mentioned earlier, I think what needs to stop is the bleeding of discharges. There's a sitting legislation in the Senate that we already had passed that will take care of the hospital moving forward. I know this legislation is inclusive of a uh, retroactive rate. Sorry, is to retroactively impose this on CUC in regards to CHCC's rate. I'm not saying that CHCC shouldn't agree to the payment plan that they negotiated with the CUC back in, if I'm not mistaken, maybe June or some period back then. But the thing that I know is we need to reduce the rate. We're in the process of negotiating this dividend payment with the CEDA that would also address the needs of the central government and CHCC's arrears at the same time. So I think that with the sitting legislation in the Senate, I think the Senate should act on that legislation so that it can stop the charges to CHCC as they are today, moving forward. The negotiations of the arrears we should address with CEDA, CUC, CHCC, and the central government. Again, see are the leverage of the central government, or at least through the body of SNIOD, owns the funds from these dividends. And if we obligate those funds directly to CEDA, we remove CHCC's obligation to pay for dividends to CEDA. We can, at the same time, we can assist the central government and CHCC with their arrears. But moving forward, if we don't address the moving forward stuff until the day we pass either one legislation, it's going to continue to charge CHCC or the central government at that rate that's currently in law right now. But if we can get that bill out of the Senate and into the governor's onto the governor's desk for his signature, moving forward, CHCC can be concentrated on that rate rather than trying to negotiate with CUC because of calculation differences, right? So if we can move forward with that legislation, get that in the governor's desk, get CHCC and all the government entities into that rate already, we can fix the arrears because there's other stuff that we can address. The legislation in itself is only talking about CHCC. One of the arguments of the original bill from the House side was we wanted to include all government entities. So we may, as a body right now in this committee, agree to this legislation, but once it gets to the floor, there's going to be amendments to it to include other government entities, right? And so if we include other government entities, what's the point of changing the rate when we already removed the arrears? Right? So I think we need to pass the legislation to change the rate, and let's work on the arrears with CPUC, CUC, CEDA, and the central government all on the same table. Which was failure to do that, we're gonna end up arguing on this bill as to what about CPA, what about DLNR, what about DPW, and we already have the debate between DPW and CUC in regards to the street lights, right? So a lot of the monies that we appropriate to DPW, they're using to pay the street lights when the primary obligation in any jurisdiction is infrastructure. And who provides infrastructure? CUC provides us for infrastructure for power, water, wastewater, right? So I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that yes, this legislation addresses CHCC, and we can agree. There's 6 of us right now. There's another 14 members that would say, well, we want to include, let's take Tinian's, a classic example, the Manamco Center. Let's take Tinian's Manamco Center, remove all the arrears. Right? That's only one. We still need to talk about all the affairs offices, all the departments, the line item agencies, other autonomous agencies. It's going to be a cluster of amendments to this legislation that's already sitting in the Senate for passage, so that we can address the rate and move forward while this body with CHCC, CEDA, and CUC can work on the arrears to remove those arrears. That's just my 2 cents. And I think it's going to be difficult to just leave it as is because there's going to be multiple amendments to this legislation once it gets to the floor. We can agree and fight with the six of us, but last I checked, 14 is always going to be more than six. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Repato. I recognize Rep Flor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the bill that Rep. Attal's talking about is the initial bill that you had introduced, correct?
That's
So
affirmative. That's Bill 2359.
59. Okay, so this Senate bill that they're talking about that's on today's agenda is a recycled bill, reintroduced from last year. No, this is a new one? Okay, so with that being said, I mean, I think we should table this and really move forward on moving your version of the bill based on Rep. Attal's explanation, because there's no need to keep amending and amending when you have an existing, excuse me, bill up at the Senate. So I moved that we move to table 23, Senate Bill 2337 SD1. Then I yield.
Thank you. So just to make sure that the public understands this. So the Senate Bill 2337, Senate Draft 1, okay, specifically just to the viewing public so that they understand again, this only specifies the hospital, CHCC, where the House Bill 2359 focuses on all government agencies, whether autonomous, semi-autonomous, or not. So, and I agree with Rep. Atto where, we cannot just do one right now because as it currently stands, 2337, only focuses on the hospital where we're trying to focus on, the whole thing. So I hope that the public understand that I do agree that at the beginning I was thinking that we should um, amend Senate Bill 2337 to get it in line with House Bill 2359. But with that being said, it's kind of like we're going around in circles on the same bill, but we're trying to focus more on the bigger picture, where the Senate bill is very specific, where the House bill is inclusive of everyone. So I have to track my statement to the hospital where we say that we're going to do something with the bill, but like as a Rep. Atto said, the House bill that we have already placed in front of the Senate needs to act on it promptly so that we don't have to waste our time on the Senate version. Am I right? So instead of trying to do anything with 2337, we'll just table it and try to get the Senate to move on House Bill 2359. And with that being said, once that's done, then we could go back and get with all parties involved to deal with House Bill 2352. I recognize. Okay, so we have a motion to table 2337, Senate Draft 1. All those in favor say aye. All those in favor say no. Or nay. All those opposed say nay. All right. With that being said, next item on the agenda, we have miscellaneous. Any discussion? Can I get them ready? All right. So next item. No, actually, that's recognition for the adjournment. Next item on the agenda. Can I get a motion for adjournment? I recognize. Oh, motion has been seconded. All in favor, of motion say aye. All opposed say nay. This meeting is hereby adjourned. Thank you.